If this video does good, depending on requests, I can make the next video being an engine cranking but no start, chasing a spark or a fuel issue. Got ourselves a no start, no crank situation on the 68 Mustang 289. You yourself are watching this video because you yourself probably have a similar situation, or if not the same situation. So let me tell you the things that I have done and what I'm doing moving into the future. I've already swapped out the old solenoid. I'll be showing how I'm rewiring this thing. I have new wires sitting over there on the table, as well as a new alternator. I'll be swapping that out. Once I remove that, I'll show you the underside, the backside of the alternator, and how I'm swapping out the wiring, this negative wire to the battery, and how it attaches to the block. This is another important wire that I'll be swapping out because it's frayed and corroded and nasty. The wire to the starter from the backside of the solenoid, I'll be swapping that out. It's over there. Here, let me show you that. It has a cool little heat shield on it. So this is brand spanking new. So why not swap out all the wires? I probably should be testing a lot of these components, but I'm not. I'm just swapping it out just to get it running. I've already swapped out the ignition about a year ago, the key ignition, so that should be good. If not, I have another one, a new one at the house. The alternator is probably bad, so once I do the wires and the alternator, I'll be starting that up here in the next few hours, and I'll kind of show you what the conclusion of that spiel is. It's been established you have a no start, no crank situation, and you're racking your brain searching forums. How do you get your engine started? I'll apologize, I'm not using any testing components, whether it be a multimeter or a test light, though that is a viable option that all you armchair mechanics that weren't brave enough to make a video, please comment in this forum we call YouTube. Leave a comment. It's extra knowledge to help people get their engine started. There are car guys out there that want to know how to test this specific component. They want to be more efficient in the end. I don't blame you. I apologize, I'm not doing that in this video because I'm doing the tried and true method of throwing parts at the issue until it's fixed. But if you have the knowledge, leave the comments. Build us up, man. But today we're going to get your car started by listing 7, 8, 9 separate components that could be the culprit of your no start, no crank situation. Here's a list of potential faulty components which could be the culprit of your no start, no crank situation. Even as I'm making this video, going through the parts in my head, it dawns on me yet another component which could break down and add to this no start situation, so I'm constantly updating this list. For instance, number 4 on this list, the alternator. If the diodes are worn on the alternator, the engine won't start, but what about the wiring harness behind the alternator? What if that's faulty, corroded, or disconnected? Wouldn't that simulate the same alternator failure issue? This is that point of the video where if you are a troll, be sure to leave a comment letting me know. Perfect opportunity to test the component. Moving on, we'll head over to the list. Starting from the top, working our way down, we'll begin with the starter, then solenoid. Next comes a regulator, then alternator, the ignition, the key ignition, the battery, the neutral safety switch, the bulkhead harness, which is basically the firewall wiring, and a bad ground. We'll end off at that. Before you pause the video and just use this list to replace all the components until the engine starts, let's start with that starter, why don't we? Hey, as I was making this video, deep in the archives of my cobweb memory, a conversation I had with the parts guy behind the counter is there's 2 different types of starters, automatic transmission starter and there's the manual transmission starter. Though I have a 4-speed, I have an automatic transmission starter. And I know that's odd, but keep in mind, as situations like this are going to pop up, weird circumstances where you're going to have to research automatic transmission starter going in your manual transmission are going to arise. But like I said at the beginning, I don't want to dive too deep into a specific component. I just want to show you the location and show you where to go on forums or where to go on the internet to look how to fix it. Unlike more modern vehicles, the solenoid and the starter in a 68 Mustang are 2 separate components instead of being 1 unit. Sometimes on engines that are a little more hopped up than others, or engine bays that can't evacuate the heat as well as it should, the starter will experience something called heat soak, where you have to wait 20 minutes for the engine to cool down to restart it. Sometimes a higher quality starter is a remedy for this, but your ability to research and problem solve will dictate whether or not you can fix this starter issue. The solenoid is an interesting component where it has 2 types of wires, both thick and thin, with one being both hot and positive from the battery and straight to the starter motor, and then a thin set of wires that come from the bulkhead harness itself. The thick wires, which are 4-gauge OEM, some people like to rewire them at 2-gauge. I swap mine out, both the battery side and especially the starter side, which was corroded to hell. If you're searching for a picture of a schematic between the battery, the starter, and the solenoid just to go out to your vehicle and see a rat's nest of wiring. Let me give you a live version of that to help out a little bit. The solenoid on a 68 Mustang. Let's go over how it's wired because I already have the alternator off. I'm swapping it out. And since it's off and I can get to the backside and show how the negative is attached to the block, why not? Why not show how this thing's wired? We have the positive side with the additional wires and any accessories on the front of the solenoid. So this goes to the positive side of the battery. We have the red wire, we have the brown wire, red on left, brown on right. This wire right here, which I'll be swapping out, which is on its lonesome, goes to the starter wire. This wire right here, which goes to the negative portion of the battery, it goes to the block. And let me try to get this thing, see it right there, yeah, see it right there? Yep, I can't zoom in. Yep. That's it right there. It's on the back side of the alternator, on the left side of the block. And that is how the negative portion of the battery gets to the chassis, the engine, gets to the vehicle itself. Now for the smaller wires on the solenoid, both the red, brown, and sometimes white, depending on if you even have that wire or not, if they need to be rewired, this is where things get difficult. I'm going to make a part 2. I'm going to make a whole separate video rewiring the entire car, and I'm going to dive deep into rewiring this loom harness from both the firewall of the vehicle to the ignition switch to the solenoid and how to rewire these small 10 to 12 gauge wires. As far as the ignition switch goes, it's behind your key. You can search up how to replace it on the very internet that you're looking this up. The unfortunate part about me installing mine is that I installed it with the keys cocked. Keep in mind that a 68 Mustang is different than a 65 Mustang. I'm assuming that a 70 Mustang is different, how it screws in, how it clips in, so just keep that in mind. I'm not going to make a video about that. The next component and location on this list is a regulator. How do you know if it's bad or not? When it comes to the voltage regulator, we're getting pretty deep into the electrical system. So when in doubt, just swap the component unless you want to get yourself a multimeter and start testing things. On to the next component. But real quick, before we go, making this video has educated me on the existence of solid state regulators and how upgrading them might be an upgrade to your electrical system overall. So if you have the time and patience, keep that in mind. Now I find this interesting. A bad alternator will make it so that an engine won't start. I've had plenty of vehicles that ran with a bad alternator. They just won't charge the battery. So how is it that a bad alternator won't start a vehicle? Well, according to forums, if the diodes go bad in an alternator, the vehicle has a potential to not start itself. I don't get it, but when I had a second person go to turn the key as I was looking at the engine, I did see a spark shoot out the backside of the alternator, and then the engine just clicked. Wouldn't start, no crank. It was an old, dirty, nasty alternator, so I swapped it out. Next thing you know, the engine's running. So I don't know, I don't get it. Engine works. The last part of the video, we got a list here and a dead GoPro, which we need, what, 2 minutes to hurry up and cap this thing off. I'm gonna go off script. The 3 remaining things on this list are battery, bulkhead harness or firewall wiring, and a bad ground. A battery, pretty straightforward. If you want to throw parts at it and just see if the problem is fixed, go ahead and do it. Or you can test that battery out at O'Reilly's. Be sure you do your part and clean the terminals off with baking soda or soda pop and a wire brush. I'm not really sure. Or you can swap out the wires as well, which I did on my 68 Mustang. The next thing, which gets more difficult as we go along, the bulkhead harness or the firewall wiring. And how to fix that without going into open heart surgery is a bit difficult. As I segue into the next set of videos, being rewiring of the 68 Mustang with the American Autowire, and you can do the same with the painless as well, I'm gonna learn a lot about the internals behind the dash wiring. I know this, a 1970s Mustang and below do not have a fusible link. They also don't have a fuse for the starting circuitry. So that makes it difficult. A lot of people say, oh, just check the fuse, swap the fuse out for the starter. It doesn't exist for a 60s Mustang. So when you're chasing down the wire, keep that in mind as you're looking up forums. So the next thing, a bad ground. If you're trying to chase that down, you're gonna need to invest in a multimeter. Come to find out, I actually had a bad ground in my 68 Mustang. I found it by chance.
Again, in my next few videos I'm gonna be doing, I have a water pump timing chain and timing chain cover that I swapped out. I already have all the footage for that, but when I re-put back the ground, I forgot to tighten it down, and it compounded the no start issue. When I swapped out the alternator, after the alternator shot sparks out the back of it, and I started touching the wires, I realized that I hadn't tightened down the negative terminal. Shame on me. So I'm gonna cap off this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, and comment. If you have any knowledge and you don't like anything I'm doing, be nice, man. Just tell me, hey, you know what? Be sure to check this out, because I'll just delete your comment if you're not nice. And for all you guys out there who are having problems not getting your vehicle started, you know what? Message me. If I don't know how to find the problem, I can problem solve. I mean, I'm probably just as good as you, but you know what? I'm gonna stop talking. I'm gonna cap this video off and take a drink of my coffee and wish you guys good luck.